So this is what I know to be true for a services sales quoting life cycle, and just want to walk through it so that everyone's grounded in the same understanding. So things typically start with an opportunity, and this is where the sales team engage with the prospect, right? Assessing the fit. They build rapport, start developing relationships if they don't already have one, and they position a services offering as a valuable solution that moves into a quoting stage in a mature practice. This is where a detailed proposal is built out and provided, outlining all of the services that are going to be offered, pricing, project timelines, level of effort, and things of that nature. And really, this is where the clear understanding of the client's requirements come into play, and that is a formal offering that services firms are going to be working through with the customers. And ultimately, that ends up in a contract or a statement of work. And this is where all of that information from all of the relationship building and rapport and the quote comes into play in terms of a document that specifies the scope, right? Deliverables, timelines, responsibilities, terms, expectations, and things of that nature, so that the customer and your services firm have a clear understanding of what is expected. What are the rules of engagement? How do we define success? How are we going to receive payment for these services and goods? And then really, how do we move forward and set the tone for the implementation? So I want to just dig in here real quick, right? I'm a firm believer that services delivery starts up front with a quote, right? And if you're in services delivery, you are the bridge, right, between what gets promised or sold and what gets delivered. So the quote is the first step in the delivery lifecycle, and that is your chance and your opportunity to influence the success of the project before the project even starts. So again, as services delivery professionals, whether you're a PM, a consultant, a project sponsor, an integration specialist, you name it, you're the bridge of taking what was sold and what's being delivered to the customer, which is ultimately the value that they're expecting. So again, I said it starts with a quote in services delivery. If you don't have alignment up front in the quoting cycle, it leads to failure points in delivery, right? So quoting is not just a sales activity. I want to make that super clear. It really helps define what's the scope of what's being delivered, what is the resource plan, customer expectations, margin profitability, all of those fun things. So I want to just take you back in time a little bit, right? When everyone was operating in spreadsheets and emails, back of a napkin at a restaurant, right? To build out what does a particular customer need? What does a good quote look like? And if you can just identify yourself with either one of these pictures, on the left-hand side, you see a guy, right, on the phone, looks like he's stressed out beyond all belief, trying to sort out what's what. This is him building a quote with no formal tool, right? No formal templates, no expectations, no good practice. And on the right-hand side, you've got a mature practice where they're using a mature process, a standardized tool, things of that nature to help them get to that next level and consistency in the quoting and delivery process. Just to break it down a little bit further, a good quoting process is standardized. We've got templated quoting with automation, perhaps some AI guidance. Your scoping is tiered, so you've got different levels or dimensions of a customer, right? It might be their industry, their segment, their size, things of that nature that might help you say this particular item that we're scoping is a small, medium, or large effort, right? Which would influence the scope potentially, the hours and resources, the training and change management that you're going to be offering, things of that nature, right? Also, the pricing logic is going to be dynamic. It's not going to be a one size fits all every single time unless you're selling a pre-packaged thing that's not delivering different value based on the different dynamics at play. And then a mature practice is also, having an integrated quoting engine or quoting tool that's integrated with your CRM and your PSA. You've got interoperability, you've got data visibility, and you've got clear line of sight into resources that are needed in the delivery cycle. Immature practice is all the guy on the left-hand side of the page on the previous slide is super ad hoc spreadsheets, tribal knowledge, right? Not everyone understands what's going on. It's either super generic or too detailed that lacks delivery informed input. So we'll get into in a little bit just how services teams can integrate and build relationships with their sales teams, which is super important. But an immature practice, again, is super generic, not a whole lot of involvement from delivery. You've got manual entry in terms of, maybe in a spreadsheet, what's my bill rate, what's my cost rate? Those things are slipping up because you've got human intervention, right? And then you've got these standalone tools using, again, Excel, Word, emails, backup napkin, things that are disconnected from your CRM and your PSA. Again, if we break it down a little bit further, you want to make sure that your mature practice has a good approval workflow that's workflow based. You can audit it. Maybe it's got different triggers and thresholds that go to different levels of approval, things like discounting and overall sales, bookings amounts and things of that nature might be approved by different people. If you are immature, you don't have a service catalog or an offering catalog. If you are mature, you have a defined and data-driven offering catalog. And we'll dig a little bit into how to build one of those in just a few minutes. In terms of risk management in the quote, I said earlier, everything starts with the quote up front. If you're not assessing risk up front, that's an immature quoting practice, in my opinion. If you are assessing risk and adjusting your quote based on that risk, getting that proactive delivery input, that is a mature quoting practice. And then if you're not utilizing any automation, right, not using any of the tools that we were talking about earlier, that's immature because you're opening things up to, no visibility, right? You don't have that interoperability between your CRM and your PSA. There's no cohesiveness. There's no real reporting, no opportunity to look at your your delivery hours that you're billing based on what you've quoted, right? Things of that nature. So we'll spend a couple of minutes just digging into what a scalable quoting practice is and how we can build one. So really digging into a quoting practice that's dedicated to selling professional services solutions. I think it's really important when we look at this to look at long-term scalability, right? A lot of times you can get overwhelmed if you don't have a formal sales, team that's working specifically on services. If you don't have a clear offering, catalog, you fall in that immature bucket. We're going to talk about how to get to that maturity bucket, but it's often really easy just to be overwhelmed with where the heck do I start, right? So my tip is focus on the solution offerings that are at highest value and are in highest demand. So think of the big picture, right? What are those solutions that we find ourselves repeating often, right? Which ones are easiest to package up? And those are the ones that I recommend focusing on rather than these ad hoc one-off deals. So my perspective is that the people that are selling services should know the language, common pain points, people and resources that are needed to deliver, and then the base set of hours and level of effort that are needed to deliver those services. So services experts should be brought in as soon as possible in deals earlier and often to be able to help identify the clear scope, timeline, risks, and things of that nature. And in my opinion, mature businesses master that partnership between sales and services. I think a lot of services delivery teams today find a lot of pushback, a lot of negativity and headbutting between their sales team and their delivery teams because sales is getting pressure up front on services is too expensive. You take too long to get engaged, right? And services needs to have that visibility so that they can make things faster, make things, more streamlined, and get that visibility into what resources do we need and when, right, to deliver what's being sold. So my advice is really to focus on the business processes that your offerings are serving, right? So what are those pain points that your customer is feeling, and how can what you're delivering to your customers help solve those problems and give them efficiencies, right? So thinking about these things, really the people that understand those solutions and those pain points, those are the ones that I recommend having involvement in defining your offerings. So how in the world do we start defining our offerings? My advice is to look at those high value, high demand services that have clear outcomes. So what are the pain points that our customers are facing? Your offering should be able to clearly define the value that you're going to bring to the customer, right? So the clear outcomes, clear deliverables that are going to help take your customer from pain to efficiency and ultimately gain. You want to also focus on building out delivery templates, resource plans, and pricing. So in my opinion, every single offering should have a delivery framework. It should have a common set of tasks, a common set of resources that are delivering that offering, and then a consistent pricing methodology. We talked earlier about how there are different variables at play that will either make an implementation or a delivery be a small effort, medium effort, large effort, perhaps. You need to have that flexibility built in, but it should always start with a base set of delivery templates, resource plans, and pricing. And then you want to make sure that you're taking into consideration all of those dynamics. But the most important thing with your offerings is that you want to, just like you go out to Amazon or you go to any seller website and you look for a specific product, you want to make sure that your marketing collateral is customer centric. So everything that you're offering in your offering catalog should be speaking the customer's language. You want to make sure that for each of those offerings as well, you've got standard scope language. So what's included, what's excluded, assumptions, customer responsibilities. And just to dig a little bit deeper into scope, right? What's included being defined up front helps your delivery team and your customer understand what's included in the scope to help them better manage the actual implementation, right? It also helps you identify potential areas of opportunity for changes, upsells, and things of that nature. And then on the flip side, what's excluded from scope really helps you and your delivery teams and your customers understand what is specifically excluded from the delivery. It helps you enable that everyone involved can focus on the priority, right? Focus on delivering what's in scope, avoid scope creep, gold plating, excessive timelines, budget burn, and things of that nature. If we dig a little bit deeper, we want to take a peek at task-based and level of effort modeling. So all of your offerings should have a map of standard tasks to delivery roles, right? So if I've got an offering to implement a Salesforce solution or implement a EMR solution for a customer, I want you to understand what roles are necessary to deliver those specific solutions, and then what specific tasks, at least at a very high level, are going to be necessary. So I see some folks that are using specific detailed tasks and have tons and tons of layers in there. That's likely not what you want to do when you're trying to quote out, right? Because you're going to have some variability. You're going to need to move hours and things like that around. I recommend keeping it as simple as possible up front, at least to start with, until you start gathering more and more data downstream. But you want to map those standard tasks, keep them at least at that high level, phase level, and that can lead downstream to your PSA solution to be your base project plan, right? So it all starts with the quote up front. We want to build our budgets from consistent work packages so that we know, We've got visibility. If we're using a professional services coding tool, we're using a PSA, we can go back in time and see we maybe have quoted 100 hours for this particular offering, but we consistently deliver it in 150 or maybe 30 hours, right? So we can see how we're performing against how many hours and level of effort we've quoted up front. And then it's always a good practice, in my opinion, and curious to the opinion of those on the call, right? I like to build in contingency because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And what you don't know up in the quoting cycle is going to hurt you downstream. So I like to build in a 5 to 15% buffer just to allow for some scope variability, some risk variability, and help me to be able to cover the things that maybe I don't know. In terms of really operationalizing our scoping and quoting, really, again, to drive it home, we're centralizing our offering management. We're building that catalog of offerings with reusable templates, defining those standard delivery plans and timelines up front. It's a good practice to create a statement of work library, and good services quoting tools have the SOW and scope and delivery language already embedded, which is great. To take it a step further, what I've done for our firm is created a custom GPT where we take all of our statements of work, our templates, and we put them in there, and we'll take sales discovery, call transcripts and things like that, and drop that into our custom GPT to help get guidance on what offering should we be quoting, what statement of work language should I include or exclude based on those specific scenarios. Really, another key part is to develop the sales and services engagement norms. So if you think of any relationship, whether it's internal to a company with a customer, so on and so forth, you want to foster relationships and build trust with your sales teams as a services delivery org, right? You want to educate the sales team on the value of services and how to engage with services. And then you want to push as hard as you can, right, where necessary, to be engaged in key deals early and often, right? A lot of times customers don't really understand the nuance for a key large deal, a complex deal, because they don't have anyone that's knowledgeable, that's done it before, right, has seen the pitfalls or the successes by doing specific activities because services wasn't engaged. So I recommend fostering those relationships with your sales team, getting engaged early and often, and really driving things for your organization. I also recommend using a CRM and PSA integrated quoting tool like PSQuote. We're going to dive into PSQuote, and they're going to give us an overview of that in just a short period of time here. But things that you can get from a tool like PSQuote: streamlined quoting and proposal creation. You can improve the sales to delivery handoff by getting things right in the quote up front and driving your visibility downstream, right, in your PSA. You get optimized resource and cost management, so you have visibility up front into what resources are needed, what is the cost based on what level of effort we're going to be quoting and things of that nature. You can see what your margin is going to be, right, or baseline what your margin should be early and often in that quoting cycle. So as you make changes, you'll be able to see that fluctuate. And then it gives you also enhanced governance and version control of your quotes. So as you're talking to a customer, often the first quote that you give them, right, isn't what you end up going, to contract with, because conversations change. They pull in different people and resources. Maybe their needs change depending on the length of the opportunity. So you've got that capability to have different versions of a quote, have those go through approvals and things of that nature, right, to help you really get the best quote for the customer. And then it ultimately gives you improved accuracy in your quoting cycle. It always gives you more consistency. I think it leads to better customer satisfaction, right? Because we talked about, customers maybe saying that services is taking too long. If you don't have an integrated tool like PSQuote, right, you often have no visibility or very limited visibility into what resources are necessary to deliver the particular things that sales is trying to sell to the customer, right? So a tool like PSQuote can help you really drive that efficiency and give you true visibility into what resources with what skills, right? Maybe what regions and things of that nature we're going to need these folks in. I also recommend doing quote reviews and approval process reviews with your delivery teams to ensure that they know what to approve and what not to approve on a regular basis, just the same way that we would do an after action review or a post mortem on a project phase or an implementation at a full scale. I think that you should be consistently going back and looking at your quoting process, see what deals or what quotes or offerings are, being sold more or less, right? Where do we see overages in our budget? Where do we need to go back into our quoting tool or our offering catalog and update our roles or our hours and things of that nature, timelines, on a regular basis. And then really being able to take a look at what we sold, right? And what we actually delivered, and to be able to identify scope and estimate gaps, that really helps if you incorporate that into your quote review cycle. Just a couple of additional things to consider before I turn it over to the PSQuote team to do their overview and their demo, right, is some metrics to keep in mind and how to measure these things in terms of your quoting, efficiency is our scope variance. This is a good opportunity to validate what is the difference between the initial quoted scope and the actual, quoted scope delivered, rather. And that is really taking a look at the hours, tasks, and deliverables that you've actually quoted, right, against the actuals in your PSA system. So what is the variance between what we quoted and what we're actually delivering? If you've got good services delivery practices, good project management, you'll also be able to validate, is my scope kept within the limits of what was quoted as well. We want to be able to track in our services sales and quoting practice, our change order frequency. So how often do we issue change orders on particular projects that spawn from a particular offering? So if I've got an offering where I consistently see I'm running into change orders, 9 out of 10 times, I want to go back to my quoting practice and my offering catalog and make a change there, right? So that I can prevent a change order from happening downstream, or I can make a decision to say, we always want a change order for this specific purpose, right? So it's an opportunity to go back, and update your offering catalog. We want to validate, and this is always something that's good to consider, especially if you're looking at a tool like PSQuote, is how long does it take you to get a quote out the door today, right? And I'm sure the PSQuote team can give some statistics and some measurements and things that they've seen with their customers. But as you're looking to do this, the customers have a ton of options in the services delivery world, right? They have a ton of options in the software space. So you want to make sure that you're giving them, effective and meaningful offerings and solutions in a timely fashion. No one likes to wait for anything anymore. So it's good to measure how long it's taking you to get an initial request to an approval on a quote. And you can measure the time, either from a different phase or a stage in a quote or an opportunity, how long it took a certain group or a certain person to approve it and things of that nature. And then I like to always tie things back to our accuracy and resource forecasting. So this is really how do you measure the effectiveness of the quoted resource plan against the actual resource utilization? So when we're selling resources to deliver a particular solution, we're selling time and we're selling value. We want to make sure that the team that we've got in services is being utilized effectively, and that our cost for our services team doesn't outweigh the billable utilization and things of that nature, so that we can maintain our profitability. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the PSQuote team, and they're going to walk through the PSQuote tool and their offerings.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. We really appreciate the opportunity to come on. And I'm really impressed. Those were really great talking points that you had that you just went through. And I felt like you were really talking about a lot of the capabilities that PS Quote is really trying to address because we've worked with a lot of organizations out there, as you can imagine. Some of the largest SIs or consultancies out there, even if they have hundreds of thousands of employees, are still quoting through spreadsheets. And so not having that data on platform is, a big missing piece for a lot of these organizations. JP, if you want to take us forward here. We'll just do a quick intro, Jeremy, if that's okay, just so everyone knows who we are. I'm Joey Porter,
Perfect.
CEO here at PS Quote. I've been in professional services for over 25 years. The last 15 of those, I was either solutioning or leading and growing solution teams and go-to-market efforts. And along the way, had built a couple of quoting tools on the Salesforce platform. But then actually, I've been a PS Quote customer the last 2 years before coming over here. So I got the opportunity to work with the team here and actually use the product as a customer. John, if you want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, hey, John Schuler here. Similar to Joey, background before we launched PS Quote several years ago was in consulting and specifically focused on professional services and quote to cash and PSA tool implementation. So now on the PS Quote side for the product, focus these days mainly on marketing, go to market, and customer success.
Yeah, I'm JP Slonkowski, just account executive for PS Quote, and been very grateful for the service delivery hour. Jeremy, thanks for putting this all together.
Thanks for being here.
And hello, my name is Saif Alam. I'm the solutions engineer for PS Quote. I was a consultant in the past, and then I became actually an engineer for the product of PS Quote. And now I am working more on sales cycles.
So all the experience all around there. So awesome. Yeah, so here's just a few logos of some of our customers. You can see many of these are straight up consulting companies. They're providing professional services. We do work with a lot of organizations too that are a product company that also have a services component to it. And that's important because a lot of organizations out there, they have a CPQ solution to sell their products, which could be physical products or could be, virtual services. But CPQ products do not cover professional services quoting very well. A lot of times those organizations would still have to use spreadsheets to actually do all of the resource planning. And so one of the things that we provide is that specific portion of that, which would be around professional services quoting and can integrate back into that. We have several other larger SIs that don't let us use their logo, but yeah, this is just a quick sample, and of course, Perceptive is one of those, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here, Jeremy. Yeah, so you went into a lot of detail, Jeremy, on some of the specific pain points and the best practices around professional services quoting. And so what PS Quote is really providing is some of that visibility. So when you're doing quoting off platform, whether it's not in your CRM solution or it's on a spreadsheet, you're really lacking access to a lot of that valuable data. So the quote itself gives you the opportunity to do some of that forecasting of revenue. So what is our revenue going to look like for the next 6 months? Not just on the work that we've actually booked and that we're actually doing as part of our professional services automation tool where we can see what those schedules are, but what is the revenue demand that we're generating with the quotes in the early stages? How can we actually do revenue weighted based revenue forecasting that's much more granular level? Planning resources. So what's the resource demand by role, by region, by location? So all of that access to that data is locked away in spreadsheets. Using a tool like PS Quote, you're able to bring that onto your platform and do much more specific resource planning. Look at how you might use contractors versus your own resources and hiring plans and things like that. So it gives you a lot more capabilities there. As you mentioned and talked to, the governance and standards. So, how are you actually setting up your quotes with some of those repeatable offerings where things are predefined? This is how we're going to deliver. You've already worked out with your delivery team. This is how we're going to deliver a project, or this is how we're going to deliver a solution. So you have all of that detailed information as part of your quoting process that's pre-approved, standardized, and all of that information can go into your quote, which then goes down to how you generate your statements of work, generate your contracts, and how you're handing off that information to your delivery team so they've got buy-in into what that process looks like. And then the reporting and analytics that Saif will show you here in just a few minutes, all of that rich data around what types of offerings are you selling, what types of resource demand do you have, what's your revenue schedule, and then tying into your PSA solution and what you're actually delivering. How do we compare those things? What is our as sold margin compared to our as delivered margin? You brought up a great point. How many change orders are we doing on these projects that we're selling? So do we need to revise our offering because we're missing out on things, or we're missing things throughout the project? So lots of good detail that you can get once you have that information on platform and not segregated in multiple silos. So when we start to think about quoting at scale, and kind of that first step is just getting onto the platform. So now we're actually getting a quote, we're getting data, we're seeing margin information, we have our resources that we're planning for projects. That's kind of our first step. Then we can start to move to more guided selling where we have predefined offerings. We've got templates, we've got SOW generation. You brought up having multiple SOW templates based on the type of offerings, or based on the teams, based on the regions. Those types of things can all be part of that. Now we can start to move into more predictive, where based on one particular offering, we can start to recommend other offerings. We can start to recommend scope. We can start to recommend resources. You have your PSA integration. Those are the types of things you can start to do as you get more and more advanced on the platform. You have data that's in a system. That's where AI can start to really play a big role as you start to build data, build out your capabilities on the platform, where you can even move now into more of that autonomous phase where we can start to use AI to potentially start to generate the quote. We're just feeding it information, feeding it meeting notes, feeding it an RFP or an RFI, and have it automatically recommend to the user what that quote could look like. So that's kind of the progressive stage we're seeing right now. And you even mentioned some of the GPTs that you're creating with your team right now to help do some of that. That's what we see as the future of the platform here for us as well. All right, we'll turn it over. John, JP, is there anything else you wanted to add before Saif gives us a quick demo?
I just wanted to add, Jeremy, I liked how you talked about the sales to delivery handoff, and how organizations that attend to that and really try to create the least amount of friction and allow that to function well. We see that those teams then have the best outcomes, and so part of a big part of the architecture of the tool is to enable that. So I liked how you highlighted that, because that's a big goal for us is to help those teams align so much better.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So yes, hello everyone. My name is Saif. I'm the solutions engineer here at PSQuote. Thanks again, Jeremy, for having us on. Really appreciate it. And I just want to quickly walk you through, a more modern approach to quoting for professional services. So this is not just a quoting tool that produces a statement of work, but it also fuels strategic delivery decisions, right? So the challenge that we all face is this, right? Quoting oftentimes is disconnected from our resource planning. So we build estimates in these spreadsheets. We have these static tools, and then weeks later, our delivery team is left scrambling, right? So PSQuote flips this on its head. It lives on Salesforce, but more importantly, it captures structure, roles, rates, timelines, and it does all of this in the quoting phase so that you're not just forecasting revenue, but you're also forecasting demand for delivery capacity. So let's take a look at this dashboard here. This is real-time visibility into what is coming. These dashboards take quoting data and turns it into a forward-looking resource demand forecast, right? So you're seeing weekly projected hours by role from your pipeline across deals, practices, and regions, right? We have pipeline revenue by offering and practice. We have cash flow forecast. We have demand by skill set and role. We have a fixed fee milestone by target month. So, using this data, you'll know when you'll need to hire a new architect or shift a consultant off of a current engagement. Finance will see revenue timing, and delivery will see any staffing gaps. So everyone is aligned. Let's jump into the quoting canvas here. And you can see that we break down our quote into different offerings. So an offering is essentially a solution bundle. These are pre-configured packages of roles, hours, and tasks. And inside of each of these, you have fully flexible rate cards. And so these rate cards can be configured by region, by customer tier, or by delivery type. As you tweak these hours and roles and rates, you can see that our margin and our costs and our revenue update in real time. So this helps your SAs, it helps finance, and it helps leadership all get on the same page. There's no Excel gymnastics, there's no formulas that break. It's just a simple, streamlined tool with rules that are in place. And if you prefer to quote by phase and task, kind of how you would deliver the project, you can do that as well in this tab. Here we are dividing up our tasks that need delivery by the amount of effort we're expecting each role to contribute to that task. You can also visualize this in a Gantt. So if you prefer to see your project in this way, that is available to you. And we also have an LOE schedule. And this is where you can see where your hours are going to be scheduled for the entirety of the project. And this is kind of our direct input into that future staffing forecast. Once all of your quote is approved and finalized, we can move on to the SOW generation. You can generate any kind of document that you'd wish. It's not just SOWs, it can also be like a budgetary proposal, you name it. And this is where your deliverables, assumptions, and timelines can come together. And PSQuote can integrate then with DocuSign, Conga, or SDocs, or other common tools depending on your stack. So an example of this, once this is generated, is this document here. This is kind of the output of a statement of work generated from PSQuote and then integrated with Conga. And you can see that it pulls in your scope. It pulls in some assumptions based on your specific offerings. And it also pulls in data from the quote as well. And then at the end of this cycle, you'll likely want to hand this off to your delivery team by creating a project. And so you can do that with a single click, or if you'd like, you can have this automated into your system once you reach a specific stage in your quoting process. And once you sync to project, you will have all your scoping, your roles, and your hours fully loaded into that project. So there's no rekeying, there's no manual data entry, there's no data loss. It's just a fast, aligned delivery handoff. And PSQuote is PSA tool agnostic. So what that means is that we can sync with Certinia, Mavenlink, Rocketlane, Precursive, you name it. That is essentially an overview of the tool. But I just want to get across kind of what you keep mentioning here, which is that this is a mindset shift of quoting not just being a pre-sales activity. Quoting is the start of delivery planning, resource strategy, and margin protection. PSQuote connects all these dots. So teams can quote faster, they can plan better, and they can win more profitable work. So our team is happy to take any questions or dive deeper afterwards. and we can see how this could fit into your firm's process. Thanks again, Jeremy, for letting us demo the tool for you.
Thank you for being here. I do have just a couple of questions. One of the things that I keep on hearing from other consulting firms is, right, the ability to forecast when you might need to hire has always been there, but we're in the world now where people are building strategic partner programs and partner channels. And how does a tool like PSQuote give you visibility into maybe when you need to engage a partner during a quoting cycle, or maybe when you've reached a capacity with your current partner and need to explore new partnership opportunities?
Yeah, this is John. I can take a stab. You guys can weigh in as well. Yeah, I think Jeremy, you're talking there about potentially like contractors, right? That would help with on the delivery side. Am I following you there?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so the idea there is the pipeline resource demand, yeah, for both the internal kind of headcount planning and staffing and utilization, you have a much clearer line of sight than if everything's in spreadsheets. But then to your point, yeah, there is the use case there where on a quote, you can indicate, hey, this role is going to be delivered by a subcontractor, if you know that, So you can actually tag that in the quote. You can even identify a sub or a partner vendor or person that's going to deliver some portion of the quote. So if you do have that information, okay, you can look at your pipeline and say, okay, we have this much work, or that's kind of slotted to go to partner A versus B versus C, and also potentially like the offerings or technologies or skill sets too, if is another important piece of, are we doing more projects around technology platform A versus B versus C? So you can see all of that there, and then it can help with that really gives you, I think, a better view of to your point, I think the partner relationships and more predictability, rather than being like reactive after the fact and trying to scramble, like, oh, we sold this project, I don't have anybody, now I got to go find a sub to do it, after the fact. That's not a great place to be.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen it's pretty common for based on the opportunity weighting, delivery will start to look at those resource roles once the opportunity progresses to a certain point. Prior, you didn't have access to a lot of that data, especially the weighted or the timeline of those resources. You might have a start date or something like that, but you didn't have a lot of the granular level detail that you get with something like PSQuote. So then they're starting to look at it from a role perspective, whether or not they actually have people in house that can do it, which contractors can do it, and they can start to engage with those contractors, those partners earlier on in the stage versus waiting till it actually closes. And that's what I've seen. And that's what we did, especially at the organization I was at before coming to PSQuote, was really doing a lot more upfront before a deal closed in terms of preparing which partner we were working with, because a lot of it came down to which technology it might be as well, or the location, whether or not it's India, South America, what the preference of the customer was, because a lot of it was driven by the preference of the customer or where they could actually use resources from a location perspective.
Got it. Thanks, guys. I know when I was at my prior company 2 companies ago, we implemented PSQuote and we're quoting specific skills for resources that were necessary to deliver that offering. I think being able to, build the resource management practice as well downstream is only helped by being able to quote at that level of granularity and specificity up front as well. So anything as we wrap up here that you might want to speak about, places you guys will be, conferences and webinars and things like that you're going to be engaged in the next couple of months?
Yeah, we're looking ahead to the fall. We will be at TSIA in Las Vegas in October, and also Dreamforce in San Francisco. So those are back-to-back weeks. We're gonna have fun on the road in late October. So those are two to if you're going to TSIA or Dreamforce, drop us a line and be happy to connect. And I know there's a whole nother topic I think we didn't really get into here, but it could be a whole separate deep dive is there's a lot we're doing with AI, our AI roadmap, and around Salesforce, Agentforce, and we're working with clients on that because I think that's, Jeremy, like as you were talking about, I think you did a better job than I can do on sort of laying out the value proposition and some of like the challenges of spreadsheets and things like that. But I think one trend we've seen is that, the past 10 years, a lot of these PSA platforms have come into their own. So, 15 years ago, PSA, tools were just kind of coming onto the market. Now they're fairly well developed, but there was always this missing piece, which was the quoting and scoping. And so I think for all the reasons you laid out, like the resource demand planning, the revenue forecasting, line of sight to, skills and margin and all the good stuff you laid out. I think now there are a lot of PS organizations are coming back around to fill that quoting gap that was kind of left, even after they put in a PSA tool. And I think the emergence of the AI tools, and I think client expectations, like the market has shifted rapidly to expect like you should be able to scope faster, deliver faster. And so that the client expectations have shifted. And I think, the AI use cases now, it's just another reason to get out of the spreadsheets. There were already, 20 plus reasons to get out of it. Now I think having like, if you want to do AI use cases on top of all this data, having it trapped in a spreadsheet is going to hold you back.
Absolutely. That's a great segue into next week's topic, which is going to be building a documentation framework for AI optimized services delivery. Wanted to say a quick thank you again to the PSQuote team for joining us today for the Services Delivery Advisory Hour. Again, you can catch them at TSIA as well as Dreamforce. And then we'll see you next time.